So starting off with the change in quantity demanded, as we mentioned, change in quantity demanded is basically movement along the demand curve. So one more time, if we show this visually, we got quantity demanded, we got price. It's basically movement from one point to the next, either down the curve or up the curve. And as we mentioned, the only factor that affects change in quantity demanded is price. So basically, change in quantity demanded is described with the law of demand. And as we know with the law of demand, as a price goes up, the quantity demanded is going to go down. And then as the price goes down, the quantity demanded is going to go up. And we went through a simple example of why that happens. But what we're going to do now is dig in a little bit deeper, dig into more so the psychology of why this happens. And to do that, what we got to do is dig in a little bit deeper from the perspective of a consumer. Now, a consumer, what kind of reality are they facing? If you remember from the economics overview, what they're trying to do is they're trying to maximize their utility or maximize their satisfaction, but they run into a problem because they face scarcity, or more specifically, they face limited income. And because of these two realities here, those are the reasons of why the law of demand exists or comes about. So let's look at that first part of a consumer's perspective where they're trying to maximize their utility. And let's show through an example. So let's say that you're buying a pair of shoes. You really want to buy a pair of shoes. And let's say that you have the option of purchasing one pair or multiple pairs. So we'll have a column here with a purchase number. So if you purchase the first pair, or maybe the second pair if you buy two pairs, and then the third pair, etc., etc. Now, what's the utility that you're going to get for each purchase? So let's say that the first pair, you really want these shoes. And so you're buying them for sure, and so you're going to get, let's say, a high satisfaction. Let's say the utility is a scale from 1 to 10, so you're going to get a utility of 10 for that first pair. Now, what about buying that second pair? What's the utility going to be? Well, the utility is probably going to be less because you already got that first pair, but you might get some utility from buying the second pair because they may serve as a backup, let's say, in case that first pair gets ruined. So you might get some utility for the second pair, just not as high as a 10. So let's say maybe you'll get like a 6 over here. Now a third pair, it's not as needed, right? They could serve as a backup as well. Maybe you're getting the third pair as a gift for somebody. So it's not going to be as high of a utility as the first pair. You're really excited about that first pair of shoes that you're going to wear. Maybe the third pair is going to have a utility of like 4. So what this shows us is that for each pair of shoes that you're buying, the utility that you get from that additional pair is decreasing. And what this shows is something called diminishing marginal utility, which is a concept that we're going to cover in more detail as the course goes on. But basically what it means is that as consumption increases, marginal utility decreases. right? The utility that you're going to get from each unit of the product is going to decrease. Notice it's still positive, but it is decreasing. And sometimes it could actually turn negative. So let's say that this wasn't, we're not talking about pairs of shoes, but maybe we're talking about meals at a restaurant. So the first meal at a restaurant, you might get a utility of 10. The second meal, you might get a utility of 6. But then if you're full, the third meal may not even have a positive utility. It might have a negative utility, because at this point now, if you eat a third meal, because you're full already from the 2 meals, the third meal is going to start making you feel sick. And so your utility is actually going to go down. And so at this point, someone would have to pay you for you to consume that third meal versus you paying for the first 2 meals. Right? So that utility can actually start becoming negative depending on the good or service. Let's stick to the shoes for now though. So now let's bring in a cost column. And so let's say that first pair of shoes you bought for $150. Now, let's say that first pair you were right on the fence. Right? So you were debating in your mind, should I buy for $150, should I not? But then you decided to pull the trigger and pay the $150 for that first pair of shoes. Well, if that second pair of shoes cost $150 as well, and you weren't fully sure about buying, but you did end up buying, you were just right on the fence. If that second pair of shoes, you're getting a utility of only 6, are you going to pay $150 for that second pair? Probably not. So the only way you're going to buy that second pair of shoes that has a lower utility than the first pair is if the cost decreases. And so that's related to this, diminishing marginal utility. As consumption increases, the marginal utility of each unit decreases. And so consumers, or a consumer, will buy an additional unit only if the price decreases. Because if they're spending $150 here again, it doesn't make sense because they're only going to get a utility of 6. They should probably take that $150 and go use it somewhere else where they can get another utility of 10. So they're not going to spend that $150 here for a utility of 6. But they might spend, let's say, $100. Because if the price goes down to $100 for that second pair, well, now this utility, there's more factors involved. So another factor the consumer might feel like they're getting a really good deal for that second pair. Or maybe they could take that second pair, buy it for $100, and then sell it in the market for higher. And so that utility might increase if that price decreases. Okay, so for each, because of that diminishing marginal utility, a consumer will only buy an additional unit, potentially only if the price is decreasing. And because of this law, diminishing marginal utility, that's a reason why that law of demand comes about. So as the price increases, that demand decreases, and then as the price decreases, that demand can increase. So now let's look at the other part of a consumer's perspective, and that's the fact that they have limited income. And to start talking about limited income, let's actually pretend for a sec that the opposite is happening. Let's say a consumer has unlimited income, which would be nice. And if there was unlimited income, then notice how price wouldn't be a factor. So whether a consumer would want to buy 1 pair of shoes or 10 pairs of shoes, price wouldn't matter whether they're doing this or that. They would look at other factors. They'd more so look at, can I even fit 10 shoes in my house? Is that going to take up too much space? right? Which would be some nice problems to have. So if there was unlimited income, the price wouldn't matter for this one pair of shoes or 10 pairs of shoes, right? You would just buy whatever you want. Now, unfortunately, that's not reality, and consumers face limited income. And because they face that limited income, a decrease in the price of a good or service is going to increase the purchasing power of that limited income that they have, which as an effect is going to increase the quantity demanded of that good or service. And then the opposite, an increase in price of a good or service is going to decrease the purchasing power of the limited income that they have, which is going to decrease the quantity demanded of that good or service. And those two results there, they're called the income effect. So let me show you through an example what we mean by this. Let's say that you have $100. That's your limited income that you have right now. And you're thinking of buying shoes for $50. Well, you only have that $100, so if you do buy these shoes for $50, then you're only going to have $50 for other items. Let's say there's 3 other items that you're considering that are $25 each. Well, you're going to only be able to buy 2 of those 3 items, right? Because they're each worth $25 and you only have $50 left because you bought these shoes for $50. But let's say that you got that $100 and let's say that the shoes go on sale for $25. Well, now you have more money left over. You have $75 to buy the other items. So here you were buying 2 other items or goods or products. Well, here now you can buy 3 items. Okay, so same money, but now you can buy more items. And it's because the price of the shoes went down. So your purchasing power of that $100 increased with that decrease in price of the shoes because you're able to buy more stuff. Now, another more common way to look at this is to look at the quantity of the same product if it goes down in price. So let's say that there's a couple, they have a newborn, and right now they have a budget of $150 per week for babysitting. And let's say that they find a babysitter and she charges $150 per evening. Well, what that means is that this couple is going to have 1 evening out per week. So they can go to the movies, they can go see friends, they can participate in a hobby, right? They have 1 evening out per week. But let's say that the babysitter drops their pricing to $75 per evening. Well, now that same $150, that same budget, let's put it up here. Well, now notice that the purchasing power of that $150 went up because that price went down. So instead of 1 evening out, now they're going to have 2 evenings out per week. So they don't have to pick one or the other. They don't have to pick like, I can only see friends or I can only do this hobby. Maybe they could see friends 1 evening and then another evening they can maybe do a hobby or whatever they want. The fact that they have more evenings out with that same amount of limited income happened because the price of that service, of that babysitting service, went down. So the purchasing power of that $150 went up. And so there was an increase in the quantity demanded of that good or service to 2 evenings instead of 1. Now, a concept related to the income effect is something called the substitution effect. So let's go back to this scenario. Remember, this was the same babysitter, but let's say instead that these are different services. They're different babysitters. So let's say this is like babysitter 1, and this is babysitter 2. So they're different babysitters, perhaps different companies offering a babysitting service. So let's say that initially the couple starts off with this babysitter that's charging them $150 per evening, and so that's giving them 1 evening out per week because their budget, their income for this portion of their life is $150 per week. But let's say that they go in the market, do some research, and they see this other babysitter, and it's of the same quality. That would matter. Let's say the quality is the same, and this babysitter is charging $75 per evening. Well, now the couple, because they have that limited income there, is going to have incentives to change the service to babysitter 2, to substitute babysitter 2 for babysitter 1. And so a decrease in the price of a related or a substitute good or service, the consumer is more likely to consume the less expensive product, the related good or service, and so that would result in a decrease in the quantity demanded of the original good or service. So decrease in price of related good or service, so decrease in price of babysitter 2 would decrease the quantity demanded of babysitter 1, of that original service, right? And again, this is called the substitution effect. So you may see your textbook talk about both of these effects. They might word it in a different way than I did, but both of them fall under that perspective of limited income. And so that's pretty much it for the change in quantity demanded. So let's do a quick little summary of what we went over. So change in quantity demanded, it was movement along the curve, right? Shifting from one point to the next. You're looking at single points. And then it was basically about the law of demand. And so the only factor when we're talking about change in quantity demanded is price. And so basically as price goes up, that quantity demanded goes down. And as price goes down, that quantity demanded goes up. And then we dug in a little bit deeper of why this is happening, why the law of demand actually comes about. And there was 2 reasons. Number 1 is because consumers are trying to maximize utility. Okay, so we talked about the diminishing marginal utility of consuming extra units of a product. And so because that utility, it has diminishing marginal utility for every extra product you're trying to consume, you're only going to consume it if that price is going down. And then we had the other side, which was limited income. Right? And under this, we talked about the income effect and then the substitution effect. And basically what both of these said is that a decrease in price of a product or a related product is going to increase the purchasing power of that limited income, which is going to increase the demand, increase the quantity demanded for that good or service. So if the original good or service goes down in price, then that demand for that good or service is going to go up, the quantity demanded. And then if a related product goes down in price, then the demand for that related product, the quantity demanded, is going to go up, and then the quantity demanded for the original product is going to go down.